A Ukrainian F-16 closes on a Russian Su-35, one of the most capable fighter jets Russia flies, and, according to a top American general, wins the fight. Not a drone brought down by a machine gun, not a lucky hit from a surface-to-air battery. A fighter jet in the air against another fighter jet. Business Insider, The War Zone, and the Ukrainian outlet Militarny.com are reporting that U.S. officials have called this the first confirmed air-to-air kill by Ukraine's F-16 fleet since the aircraft entered service in the country. Here's the question worth sitting with. Ukraine's F-16s have only been flying combat missions since the second half of 2024. Russia's Su-35 has been one of the most advanced fighters in its air force for over a decade, built specifically to dominate this kind of engagement. So how did a jet that's been in Ukrainian hands for such a short time win a fight it wasn't originally built to win outright? And why does one confirmed engagement matter this much, this deep into the war? Start with what's actually being reported and what isn't. According to the outlets covering this, a senior U.S. general, speaking in an official capacity, confirmed that a Ukrainian F-16 shot down a Russian Su-35, and that this is the first confirmed instance of Ukraine's F-16 fleet downing an enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat. That's the confirmed part. The outcome, and the fact that a high-ranking American official was willing to state it on record. What isn't confirmed, at least not yet, is nearly everything else. The exact date, the location, which missile or weapon system was used, the pilot's identity, the tactical circumstances leading up to it. Going through the coverage, one thing kept standing out. How careful each outlet was to separate the headline claim, a Su-35 shot down by an F-16, from the surrounding specifics that haven't been independently verified. That's not sloppy reporting. In a live war, it's often the most honest way to handle a claim like this. Worth pausing on that, because verifying anything in this war is its own kind of fight. Ukrainian and Russian channels routinely announce shoot-downs, kills, and losses that later turn out exaggerated, unconfirmed, or wrong, sometimes on both sides within hours of each other. That's what makes an on-the-record confirmation from a U.S. general different from the usual churn of social media claims. It doesn't erase the uncertainty around the details, but it does put this claim that an F-16 defeated a Su-35 in the air in the hands of a source with the access and the accountability to be wrong publicly if he's wrong. Behind that verification problem sits a quieter process most viewers never see. Ukrainian Air Force intelligence officers reportedly cross-check radar tracks, ground observer reports, and, when it's available, recovered wreckage before a kill is even whispered up the chain of command. Analysts comb through radio intercepts, satellite passes, and geolocated video, trying to line a claimed shootdown up against a physical debris field or a documented loss on the other side. It's slow, unglamorous work, and it's why a claim like this can sit unconfirmed for days or weeks before anyone with real authority puts their name on it. When a general finally does, it's usually because that quiet cross-checking already ran its course behind closed doors. To understand why this matchup matters, go back to how Ukraine got F-16s in the first place. The push for Western fighter jets started in earnest in 2023 when a coalition, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and Belgium among them, agreed to supply F-16s and help train Ukrainian pilots. That training pipeline ran through several European countries and, for a while, the United States, and it took months longer than officials hoped, partly because flying an F-16 well takes far more than basic certification. The first jets arrived in Ukraine in the summer of 2024, and the first combat losses followed quickly. A reminder, widely reported at the time, that even a modern Western fighter doesn't erase the risks of flying in contested Ukrainian airspace. That early period was defined by caution more than confrontation. Ukraine's F-16 fleet was small, its pilots were still building experience, and commanders reportedly kept the jets on defensive work, intercepting cruise missiles and drones, supporting ground troops, staying clear of anything that put them head-to-head with Russia's best pilots and aircraft. Whatever happened in the engagement being described now didn't happen in isolation. It came after more than a year of the F-16 fleet slowly expanding its role, one mission at a time, and that buildup is part of why this moment is being treated as significant rather than routine. Look at what a typical intercept mission looks like before a jet even leaves the runway. Ground controllers watch a constantly shifting radar picture, flagging inbound cruise missiles and loitering munitions minutes before a pilot is scrambled. The F-16 pilot straps in already knowing altitude, heading, and likely target, relayed through secure data links instead of radioed blind. That kind of preparation, repeated hundreds of times over more than a year, is what turned a newly arrived fleet with a thin combat record into one that can hold its own against a far more experienced adversary. Every routine drone intercept was, in its own way, rehearsal for a moment like this one. Which brings us to the Su-35 itself. It's a heavily upgraded, single-seat variant of Russia's flanker family, built to compete with the best fourth-generation fighters anywhere. It carries a powerful radar, a long-range missile loadout, and thrust-vectoring engines that make it exceptionally maneuverable in a dogfight. On paper, it outclasses the F-16 in several ways. More powerful radar, more missiles, and, comparing export variants side by side, a wider performance envelope in certain flight regimes. That's why defense analysts are calling a confirmed loss to an F-16 noteworthy instead of shrugging it off as an unremarkable exchange between two similar jets. Here's the part that doesn't sit right at first. On paper, this shouldn't have been a fair fight, and yet a general with direct access to intelligence assessments is willing to say Ukraine came out on top. Part of the explanation, according to defense analysts cited by the War Zone, isn't really about the airframes. It's about the network around them. Ukraine's F-16S don't fly alone. They're increasingly plugged into Western-supplied radar data, ground-based air defense coordination, and NATO standard communications that can help a pilot know where a threat is before it's ever visible. A skilled pilot in a slightly less capable jet, cued in early with a better picture of the battle space, can still come out ahead of a more capable jet flying with less situational awareness. That's hard to verify from outside classified briefings, so treat it as informed analysis, not established fact. What stands out most isn't the outcome of one engagement. It's what the confirmation itself reveals about how rare, official, on-the-record acknowledgement of a specific air-to-air result actually is in this war. Most claims stay in unofficial channels, telegram posts, and competing narratives that never get resolved. A named U.S. general going on record is the exception, not the norm, and that alone says something about how significant Washington considers this result. There's a human side to this that's easy to lose in the talk of radar networks and airframe specs. Somewhere behind that Su-35's cockpit was a Russian pilot with years of training, and somewhere behind the F-16's canopy was a Ukrainian pilot who, less than 2 years earlier, may have been flying a Soviet-era MiG before ever touching a Western jet. Neither side has released names, and given the operational security concerns and the families potentially affected, that's unlikely to change soon. Every radar track, every confirmed kill in this story, represents a real person making split-second decisions at hundreds of miles an hour, decisions that determined whether they went home that night. Here's a take that'll probably draw some pushback. The more interesting story isn't that Ukraine's F-16S can beat a Su-35. It's how long it took for Ukraine to have F-16S in the fight at all. The decision to approve Western fighter jets for Ukraine came more than a year after the full-scale invasion began, and the jets themselves didn't arrive until roughly 2.5 years into the war, after extensive debate among allied governments about escalation risk. Whatever this engagement proves about the F-16's capability, it also raises a fair question about whether that capability could have been in Ukrainian hands, shaping outcomes in contested airspace a lot earlier. So here's a question worth sitting with, whichever side of that debate you land on. If one confirmed jet-on-jet engagement is significant enough to be confirmed by name from a U.S. general this late in the war, what does that tell you about how rare direct air-to-air combat between these two air forces has become, and why? That rarity is part of the picture. Contested airspace over the front line has made both sides cautious about putting manned fighters within range of the other's most advanced surface-to-air systems. Most of the war in the sky has been fought by drones, cruise missiles, and ground-based air defense, not classic dogfights. A confirmed F-16 versus Su-35 result stands out because engagements like it have been the exception for most of the conflict, which is part of why officials on both sides tend to handle any confirmed instance with unusual care before speaking publicly. That same caution shows up in how wreckage gets handled when it can be reached at all. In contested or frontline territory, investigators, when they can get anywhere near a crash site, face landmines, ongoing shelling, and a narrow window before either side moves to recover or destroy anything useful before the other can document it. Photos of tail numbers, engine serials, or missile fragments circulate online long before any official statement, which is why analysts treat unverified wreckage photos with the same skepticism they apply to unverified shootdown claims. In this case, no such photographs have surfaced publicly, which is itself part of why so much of the surrounding detail remains unconfirmed. One detail that's stuck, going through this coverage, is where the confirmation came from. Not a Ukrainian press release. Not a Russian Ministry of Defense statement, which would carry its own reasons to shade a result one way or another. A U.S. general, speaking to reporters, willing to put a specific claim on record. That doesn't make the underlying facts automatically bulletproof. Officials get things wrong, and initial assessments sometimes get revised as more information comes in. But it does put this claim in a different category than the flood of unverified shootdown claims that circulate daily from both militaries and their supporters online. So where does this actually stand right now? The confirmed fact is narrow but real. A U.S. general has stated, on the record, that a Ukrainian F-16 shot down a Russian Su-35, and that this is the first confirmed air-to-air result of its kind for the F-16 in this war. Everything beyond that, the date, the specific tactics, the weapon used, the pilot's identity, is either unreported or attributed only loosely to unnamed sources, and we're not going to fill in those gaps with guesses. If more detail comes from Ukraine's Air Force or further reporting by outlets like the War Zone, it would help confirm or complicate the picture painted so far. Worth watching for a follow-up from Kyiv rather than assuming today's version is the final one. What this moment does confirm, regardless of the missing details, is that Ukraine's F-16 fleet has moved past its early, cautious phase and into a role where it can directly contest some of Russia's most advanced fighters. Not routinely, not without risk, but demonstrably. That's a real shift from where the program stood a year ago, when officials were mostly discussing whether the jets could survive in Ukrainian airspace at all, let alone beat a Su-35. There's more nuance here than any single report has captured so far. The tactical details, the sourcing behind the general's statement, how Russia has responded, if at all. If you've come across additional sourcing on this specific engagement, we'd genuinely like to see it. Drop it in the comments, because coverage on stories like this tends to keep developing for days after the initial confirmation. For now, here's what can be said with confidence. A U.S. general has put his name behind a claim that a Ukrainian F-16 defeated a Russian Su-35 in the air, the first confirmed result of its kind in this war. The rest of the picture is still filling in, and every specific detail beyond that core claim deserves the same caution the original reporting gave it. If you want to understand how Ukraine's Air Force got here, the video we did on the F-16 training pipeline and its rocky first year in combat fills in a lot of that background, worth watching next if this story caught your attention.